The strange paradox is that the tougher the police seem to be on the innocent, the more ineffectual they seem to be when it comes to dealing with actual crime. In and around the south coast resort of Bournemouth, many shopkeepers feel abandoned by the law. One of them is Mike Vincent. He showed me an astonishing letter local traders received from a neighbourhood constable about reporting crime.
So I respectfully request that prior to calling the police, consideration to be given as to whether the matter could be dealt with within the store. I would like to recommend that the police are not called in the case of goods below a value of £75. If someone walked in here and took, I don't know, 4 or 5 things off a shelf here, anything worth less than £75, then the police didn't want you to call them, didn't think it was worth bothering.
That was what the letter insinuated, without any element of doubt. That is encouraging the lads to do it. You know, they can walk in and say, look, well, I know I can nick 70 quid's worth and nothing's going to happen.
There was also a warning against infringing the human rights of any thieves they might happen to catch.
It says, a further problem can be encountered if when you have detained a person, you have taken their liberty. If there is delay in the arrival of the police, which does happen quite often, there could be a breach of human rights.
After much negative publicity, the letter has since, unsurprisingly, been withdrawn. But what about the thinking behind it? Despite being overwhelmed by rising crime, officers have seldom been so hamstrung in the face of theft and violence. Yet they also seem curiously zealous when it comes to investigating unfashionable opinions. In the bleak coastal town of Fleetwood, just north of Blackpool, such opinions can get you into deep trouble. In December of last year, an incident here highlighted the way in which British police forces have changed their priorities, away from the concerns of ordinary people and towards political policing, curtailing what we say and feel. Joe and Helen Roberts, respectable and hard-working, felt they'd earned a peaceful retirement. But late-night noise and worse at a nearby playground have blighted their peace.
You can see all the filth and the debris that's around. It's not respected or looked
Do you get needles in there?
They have been found, yes. We lock our front door as soon as it goes dark every night because of the young ones about.
So you're afraid of that?
Yes.
It's not safe, is it?
It's not.
Police everywhere seem reluctant to turn out to deal with what is dismissed as petty crime.
Now, if you went to Fleetwood police station 6 o'clock in the evening, what would you find?
It'd be closed.
Nobody there?
Nobody there.
How often do you see a patrolling policeman on these streets?
Oh, usually about one a day. It's the community officers more than the police that you see, the voluntary police.
This is not just the tale of a retired couple neglected by the law. It has a more disturbing side. One night the police did come to see them. The Robertses thought their cry had at last been heard.
And my wife answered the front door and it was 2 policemen. And he asked her was she Mrs. Roberts, who was continually complaining about the playground over the road. So my wife let him in the house, and when he came in, the policeman reached inside his pocket, he pulled these papers out and turned around and said he'd had a phone call from Wyabuddy Council, as we'd made homophobic phone calls.
The playground problems were a mere pretext. What they really wanted to probe was a local council official's complaint about the couple's views. A few days earlier, Joe, an active Christian, had phoned the town hall to complain about its plans to promote homosexuality on council property.
I phoned up and asked him that could I please put Christian literature alongside the homosexual literature.
We were concerned that all this literature was going to be made public, and we wanted a Christian voice there.
And I was told no, as homosexuals would find it very discriminatory and offensive.
The 2 officers proceeded to lecture Joe and Helen on the wickedness of their opinions.
And they proceeded to talk to us and explain that this homophobic phone call, you know, that we were walking on eggshells and it was verging near to a hate crime, and that we needed to be very careful because hate crimes gave a 7-year prison sentence. And
A 7-year prison sentence. So that they suggested to you that what you were doing could put you in prison for 7 years.
if we carried on and went any further than what we did, yes, we were walking on eggshells, we were warned.
Didn't you find this very intimidating?
Yes, we did.
While regretting any distress, neither the council nor the police have backed down. The police say the decision to send the officers round was correct. The council say their employee acted in good faith. Such action is often justified because of the alleged offence that can result from traditional moral views. As it happens, one of those most entitled to take such offence thinks the Robertses have every right to their opinions.
If I sat down with this couple and talked with them, I doubt that I would agree much about their views on homosexuality. But nor would I agree with the police intervening and threaten them with prosecution and possibly a jail term for expressing their point of view. In a free and democratic society, we sometimes have to put up with views we disagree with, we find offensive, perhaps even insulting, because that is the price of freedom.
Just as the police seem to be becoming less and less effective at dealing with ordinary crime, burglary, mugging and car thefts, they become more and more involved in political policing, something nobody in this country would ever have thought was their job until very recently, because what they're supposed to do is to deter crime, not to investigate what people are thinking and saying.
I think in the current climate there are some elements of what one might call political correctness which has come into policing. And there have been occasions where I think out of a sense of political correctness, the police have involved themselves, and they would argue quite rightly so. I'm sure there are others who would say that all that was required was a little piece of common sense.
I'm going to see Labour peer Brian Mackenzie. He was a policeman for 35 years, rising to the rank of Chief Superintendent. He thought he, of all people, was entitled to criticise the new style of political policing, but he soon found himself on the receiving end of it.
I was invited onto the radio because Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, had allegedly, some 6 years ago I understand, during the Welsh Assembly elections, swore at the television. He'd used the F word against the Welsh. Rather to my surprise, I picked up in the press that they were busy investigating this alleged slur.
I'm joined live by Lord Mackenzie, who was President of the Police Superintendent Association of England and Wales.
I thought it was April the 1st when I first read about it. It's an absolute nonsense, but it looks like a fairly high-level decision to use these resources for such a trivial, minor issue.
To my great surprise, I received a letter from the Deputy Chief Constable of North Wales Police, Mr. Clive Wolfendale, criticising me for commenting on a case that I knew nothing about. But what was even worse was he made what I thought was a threatening comment.
Clive Wolfendale wrote, "Your contribution to the BBC programme was ill-considered and seemed personally motivated. In the event of a future occurrence, I shall be obliged to provide a response which is equally personal."
I was absolutely incensed, so I sent an equally robust letter back, pointing out that freedom of speech in this country is something that we value, and that the police really should think very carefully before they start interfering with it.
Lord Mackenzie retorted, "Your letter was reminiscent of something from a totalitarian regime, frightened of people expressing views with which you disagree. The police have been getting a bad press lately. You should ponder why before attacking the very liberties which form the foundations of our liberal democracy."
We're losing the plot, and cases where the police are investigating what people say is a frightening situation in modern Britain.
Brian Mackenzie was by no means the only one to face the New Thought police. Roman Catholic broadcaster Lynette Burrows was investigated for remarks on homosexuality made on the radio. Soon afterwards, so was a leader of Britain's Muslims, Sir Iqbal Sakrani, and even the former chief of the BBC was visited by officers after Anne Robinson was rude about the Welsh. This sort of policing may not be familiar here, but other countries know it all too well. Frederick Forsyth now better known for his best-selling thrillers, is also a veteran foreign correspondent who spent many years reporting from the continent. He believes our Europhile authorities are replacing old English rules with continental ones.
The fact of the matter is that the nations of Western Europe were all conquered by Napoleon, and their law creeds are all based upon the Code Napoleon. He was a dictator, so he left behind a code that said the state is supreme and the citizen is subordinate. Centuries of English common law have said the state is actually the servant of the citizen. And so the